Hi, my name is Madison Kelly, and I'm doing my presentation on Colson Whitehead and the Underground Railroad. A little bit about Colson Whitehead is that he was born in November of 1969, and a little fun fact about that is that that is more than 100 years after the Underground Railroad ended. And he originally wanted to write fantasies, and this stemmed from his love for comic books in the 1980s. Um, Another kind of interesting fact about him is that his first book was actually rejected by 25 publishing houses. This first book was called The Institutionalist, and he's actually very proud of that because he was able to learn from his mistakes. And even though it failed miserably, it lit a fire under him, and he started to write another book. The way that Colson Whitehead really starts his inspirations for books is to ask the question, what if? Um, all of his book ideas started with this, and it started with a crazy what if to inspire him. So, um, how he thought of the Underground Railroad idea was that what if the Underground Railroad, pardon me, was a metaphor? He thought that that just might be a crazy idea and a way to approach that topic. He was actually influenced in this book by real history, so things such as the narratives collected by the WPA in the 1930s, as well as the stories of Frederick Douglass and Harriet Jacobs. Those all influenced him. So my first slide starts with Ajari as the reason to escape and Mabel as the reason not to escape. Basically, Cora, who is the granddaughter of Ajari, um, is asked to commit to escaping by her friend Caesar, but she just cannot do it because the story of her grandma floods her brain. Ajari, who's her grandma, was kidnapped and put on a hellish ship to Port Aouda, where she is gang raped and attempts suicide 2 times. This ship ride was just horrible and torturous and just the worst that you can ever imagine. She is actually sold and sold and sold and sold again over and over and over. And she's finally sold again in Charleston for only $226. But once again, she's finally sold to the Randalls, where she has multiple husbands who either die or are sold. And then she also has 5 kids, in which 2 of them die pretty much right off the bat. And then she is unfortunately one who believes that liberty was reserved for other people and that life in captivity was inevitable. This immediately brought up the point to me where I just didn't understand how some slaves can decide that they want freedom and then others can just accept captivity. That concept just escapes me. But it is clear in the example that Mabel is the only surviving child of Ajaris and she wants to get out. She believes that she deserves freedom and she is actually the only one that can escape the Randalls. My next point is the garden. This garden was very important to Ajari, and she passed it down to Cora when she died. And it made me think of how white settlers fought for large chunks of land, similarly to how the slaves would fight each other for small bits of land to call their own. Ajari threatened death if anyone even thought of touching the garden, and they respected that. But now that she's dead, people wanted the garden from Cora and Ava especially, and she wanted it so much so that Ava struck a deal to have Cora exiled to the Hob, which was a place for exiled wretched slaves, a horrible place for women to go. The next scene that really stuck out to me was Shocky's birthday party. It was all going swell until Terrence and James Randall busted into the party, and Terrence was the more aggressive slave owner and landowner, and he demanded that the slaves dance. And so when they did this, one of the slaves, Chester, accidentally bumped into him and spilled Terrence's wine on him, and so of course Terrence decided to lash them, and Cora dove in to lessen his lashing, which was kind of her first really just like I hate Terrence situation. The next situation in which this happened was James's death. James Randall died, and Terence therefore took all of the farm over, which encouraged Cora to want to run away even more. But an even bigger situation was when Terence brutally burned her friend Big Anthony, and then continued to touch Cora in a very inappropriate way. So right after both of those instances, she went to Caesar to confirm her commitment and her desire to want to run away. Pardon me. Fletcher was a part of the plan that Caesar had worked up in his brain. Fletcher was a white man from Pennsylvania who really hates slavery. Fletcher noticed Caesar because he noticed that he could read and write. And so Cora and Caesar invited their friend Lovey, but it wasn't really recommended by Fletcher because he didn't think there was enough room. And unfortunately, Lovey got captured by some hog hunters. I accidentally clicked too soon, but Ridgway was my next point, and Ridgway was a son of a blacksmith who did not want that life, so he moved away to New York to catch and sell slaves. He is a brutal man that believes in the Great Spirit, which tells him that if you can keep it, it's yours. Mabel escaped from him and his grasp to capture her and send her back, and so once he found out that Cora also escaped, it is now his vendetta to shut down the railroad and capture her and send her back. Again, I'm sorry for the technical difficulties, but this is also my works cited page. I used those 3 sources, and I'm very excited to finish the rest of this book. It was very interesting thus far. Thank you so much. Goodbye.